When Evelyn Harris moved into her new apartment on Maple Street, she thought it was her fresh start. The small New England town of Millbrook Falls looked peaceful. White fences, trimmed lawns, and streets lined with orange leaves that whispered in the autumn wind. The building she chose was old but charming. A 2-story red brick duplex with ivy crawling up its sides and a faint smell of dust and time. Her landlord, Mr. Keller, was a tall, thin man in his 60s with pale eyes and a slow smile. "You'll like it here," he said when handing over the keys. "The house has history." Evelyn smiled politely. She was a schoolteacher, quiet, patient, and practical. History didn't scare her. That first night, she unpacked her boxes, made tea, and sat near the window watching the fog roll down the street. Everything was calm. Around midnight, she turned off the lights, crawled into bed, and closed her eyes. Then she heard it. A soft, slow whistle. 3 long notes, high, low, high, drifting through the darkness. At first, she thought it came from outside, maybe the wind through the trees. But as she listened closer, the sound seemed to come from inside the wall, right behind her headboard. She sat up, frowning. The noise stopped. The silence pressed against her ears. A few minutes later, it started again. It wasn't random. It sounded human, like someone whistling a tune. Faint but clear. She turned on her lamp and stared at the wall. Nothing, just cracked wallpaper and an old picture hook. Evelyn felt foolish for being afraid of a sound. "Old houses make weird noises," she whispered to herself. "It's nothing." But she didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, she met Mr. Keller outside. He was watering the plants on the porch, the same faint smile on his lips. "Morning, Miss Harris," he said. "Morning," she replied. "Hey, do you know if the pipes whistle or something? I heard a strange noise last night." He paused, lowering the watering can. His expression stiffened just a little. "Ah, yes. The old walls do that sometimes," he said quickly. "They settle. Don't worry about it." Something in his tone didn't feel right. But Evelyn just nodded and went to work. That night she made sure to keep her lights on. She even played soft music on her phone while brushing her teeth. But as soon as she turned everything off, the whistle came back. This time it was louder. She sat perfectly still, her heart thudding. The sound wasn't constant, it came in short bursts like someone testing a melody. When she leaned close to the wall, she could almost hear a breath between the notes. She grabbed her flashlight and followed the sound along the wall. It led her to her closet. The air there was cold, strangely cold. When she opened the door, she noticed a small round hole in the wooden panel at the back, no bigger than a coin. It looked like something had chewed or burned through the wood. She crouched, shining her light into the hole, but there was only darkness. The whistling stopped. Then a breeze brushed her face, a soft, warm breath from inside the wall. She stumbled backward, slamming the closet door shut. The next morning, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching her. She tried to distract herself by visiting the local diner. The waitress, Marla, was friendly and talkative with silver hair and kind eyes. "You're the new tenant in the Keller House, aren't you?" Marla asked. "Yes," Evelyn said. "You know it?" Marla's smile faded. "Everyone knows that house, and what do you mean?" Marla leaned closer. "It used to belong to old Arthur Keller, the landlord's father. He was strange. People said he talked through the walls to his wife after she died. Whistled to her every night. Then one winter he vanished. Police never found him." Evelyn's stomach turned. "That's just a story, right?" Marla shrugged. "Maybe, but no one stays long in that apartment." That night, Evelyn set her phone to record audio and placed it on her nightstand. She wanted proof. When the clock hit 11:47 p.m., the sound returned. Faint but rhythmic, as if someone was only a few feet away. She pressed record and whispered, "Who are you?" The whistling stopped. Silence. Then, slowly through the wall came a voice, raspy and low. "You're not her." Evelyn froze. Her phone screen glowed beside her. She stared at the wall, unable to move. After a few seconds, the voice came again, softer, closer. "But you sound like her." The light bulb above her flickered and buzzed. The room grew colder. She reached for her phone with shaking hands and stopped the recording. But when she played it back, there was no voice. Only static. And under the static, the faint sound of whistling. She turned off the phone, climbed out of bed, and pressed her hand against the wall. It was ice cold. From behind it came a final faint sound. Not a whistle this time, but a sigh. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dry leaves against her window. Evelyn whispered to herself, "It's just the house. Just the house." But deep down, she knew the truth. Someone was behind the wall. The next morning, Evelyn Harris sat at her kitchen table staring at her phone. She had listened to the recording a dozen times already. Each time it was the same. Faint static, a low hum, and that impossible sound. It wasn't imagination. There was definitely someone or something behind her wall. She told herself she'd imagined the voice saying, "You're not her." But she couldn't ignore how clearly it had spoken. Not muffled, not distorted, as if the speaker had been standing inches from her ear. The day dragged by in a haze. She taught her students, smiled through lessons, and pretended to be fine. But when the final bell rang, she found herself dreading the thought of going home. By the time she reached Maple Street, the sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving the neighborhood bathed in cold gray light. Her house looked different now. Not cozy, not old-fashioned. Just watching her, Evelyn decided to stay busy. She cooked dinner, turned on the TV, and forced herself to laugh at a sitcom she wasn't watching. But as soon as the clock struck 11:47 p.m., the air seemed to shift. Her skin prickled. The TV flickered. And then came the whistle. Slow, familiar teasing. She muted the TV. The whistle stopped. She whispered, "Who are you?" A pause. Then, faintly through the wall, a soft chuckle. Her blood turned cold. This time she didn't run. She stood, trembling, and walked to the closet. The hole in the wooden panel looked darker than before, almost pulsing. She leaned close but didn't dare look inside. Instead, she whispered, "What do you want?" For a moment, nothing. Then a voice like dry paper rustling said, "You heard me last night." Evelyn gasped. Her throat went dry. "Who are you?" she asked again. "Arthur," the voice said simply. "Where is she?" Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. Who do you mean?" "Margaret." The whisper dragged out the name, long and aching. She stopped answering. "But I can hear her breathing." Evelyn stepped back. "There's no one here," she stammered. "You lie," the voice hissed. "You sound like her. You move like her. You took her room." The light bulb above flickered violently. Once, twice, and then burst with a sharp pop. Evelyn screamed, grabbing her flashlight. The room fell into shadow. The beam trembled in her shaking hand. When she pointed it toward the closet, she froze. A pale outline, like a face, when pressed from inside the wall. Its features barely visible through the cracked wallpaper. Eyes, a mouth, moving. The whistle returned, louder this time, echoing from inside the plaster. Evelyn ran out of the room and didn't stop until she reached the front door. But when she tried the handle, it wouldn't budge. She twisted and pulled, but it was like the door had welded itself shut. The whistling followed her, softer now, moving along the walls, circling her like a predator in the dark. And then silence. The next morning, she called Mr. Keller. Her voice shook as she told him everything. The noise, the hole, the voice in the wall. He didn't sound surprised. "I'll stop by later," he said calmly. "Don't worry yourself, Miss Harris. The house has memories." "Memories?" she repeated, but he had already hung up. Evelyn didn't wait for him. She needed to know what was behind that wall, so she drove to the Millbrook Historical Society. A small brick building filled with yellowed records and old photographs. The clerk, a young man with messy hair, helped her find the house's file. It was thin, just a few faded pages. Built in 1921, owned by Arthur Keller and his wife, Margaret Keller. Margaret died in 1953. Cause accidental gas leak. Arthur disappeared 3 months later. Never found. There was a newspaper clipping too. Local man missing after wife's death. The last line made her stomach twist. Neighbors reported hearing a tune whistled through the walls of the Keller home every night before his disappearance. Evelyn's hands trembled. That tune. The same one. That evening, she returned home with a plan. She would seal the hole, maybe even sleep somewhere else for a few nights. But as she entered her bedroom, she stopped dead. The hole in the closet wall was larger now. The wood looked torn outward from the inside. She backed away, heart pounding, and fumbled for her phone. Before she could dial, the whistle came again, softer, almost gentle. It floated through the air like a lullaby. Then the voice followed, calm, broken, and close enough to make her skin crawl. "You shouldn't have read about me." Evelyn dropped the phone. "Arthur?" she whispered. "Don't say my name," he hissed. She used to say it that way. The flashlight on her nightstand flickered on by itself. For a split second, the beam lit the wall and she saw it. A shadowed figure behind the plaster, its hands pressed flat, its mouth forming a perfect circle as it whistled. The sound grew shrill, vibrating the air until her ears rang. She clutched her head, crying out. The bulb exploded again. Darkness swallowed her room. In that suffocating black, she heard the voice one last time. "If you won't be her, I'll make you her." The whistling stopped. The room fell dead silent, except for the faint sound of scratching. From inside the wall, Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She sat in the corner of her living room, wrapped in a blanket, her flashlight pointed toward her bedroom door. Every few minutes she thought she heard it. Faint scratching like nails dragging along plaster. Sometimes slow, sometimes fast, but always from the same wall. By sunrise she was trembling. Her coffee tasted like metal. Her hands shook as she held the cup. She told herself she'd call someone. The police, a repairman, anyone. But what would she say? "There's a man inside my wall?" They'd laugh. They'd think she was losing her mind. At 9 a.m., Mr. Keller arrived. His calm face and pale eyes didn't comfort her. "You came," she said, voice hoarse. "You need to see this." He followed her into the bedroom. The closet door hung half open. The hole was wider than before, jagged and splintered. Keller crouched, staring at it silently. Evelyn waited. "Well, you see it's getting bigger. Something's inside there." Mr. Keller sighed deeply. "Miss Harris," he said quietly, "do yourself a favor and leave this house." She blinked. "What?" "You've been hearing him," Keller continued. "He doesn't like when someone new takes her place. I told myself it wouldn't happen again." "Who are you talking about?" she whispered. "My father," he said, his voice cracking. "Arthur Keller." Evelyn's stomach turned. "You're telling me that voice is your father?" "That's impossible." He stood up, his hands shaking. "I sealed this wall years ago. I thought it would stop him." "What's behind it?" Keller didn't answer. He looked at her with tears in his eyes and said, "Don't open it again." Then he turned and left. Evelyn stood frozen for a long time after he left. The quiet felt heavier now, as if the house was listening. Then a faint rhythmic sound came again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. She stepped toward the wall. The sound stopped. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Then very slowly she heard something breathing from inside. That was it. She couldn't take it anymore. She ran to the kitchen, grabbed a small hammer and screwdriver, and returned to the bedroom. If Keller wouldn't tell her the truth, she'd find it herself. She began peeling away the old wallpaper around the closet. Beneath it, the plaster looked uneven, patched over in places. She dug at it piece by piece. Dust filled the air. The more she tore away, the colder the air became. Then suddenly her hammer hit something hollow. Thunk. She froze. Then she hit again. The wall gave a muffled echo. There was a space back there. A space big enough for someone. Heart racing, Evelyn found the edge of a wooden panel and pried it loose. It came away with a long creak, revealing a narrow crawl-space yard, dark and dusty. The air that spilled out smelled of mildew and something older. Something sweet and rotten. She aimed her flashlight inside. At first she saw only cobwebs and pipes. Then her light fell on a small wooden chair. On it sat a cracked porcelain music box shaped like a heart. It was open. Inside was a small metal bird, frozen mid-turn. Without thinking, Evelyn reached in and wound the little key on its side. The bird turned slowly and began to play a tune. 3 soft notes rising and falling. Her blood ran cold. It was the whistle. She dropped the box, stumbling backward. The tune stopped, but the echo of it lingered, and then faintly, she heard the whistle continue on its own. Sst. 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 This time it came from behind her. She turned, flashlight trembling, and saw the outline of a man's shadow on the opposite wall. Tall, still, She could see the faint shape of lips moving, whistling that same melody. "Arthur," she whispered. The shadow tilted its head slowly, like it recognized the name. "You found my song," the voice said softly. Evelyn's knees weakened. "What do you want from me?" "She stopped answering me," he said. "So I waited." "Waited for what?" For her voice, a pause. Then, almost tenderly, "And now you're here." The flashlight flickered. The shadow grew darker, thicker, spreading across the wall like spilled ink. She screamed and ran for the door, but when she grabbed the handle it felt hot, burning her skin. She yanked her hand back in pain. Behind her, the whistling grew louder, vibrating through the air. The music box started spinning again, even though no one had touched it. Dust poured from the wall seams, the floorboards creaked, and the mirror across the room cracked down the middle. Evelyn dropped to her knees, covering her ears, but the sound pierced through. High, sharp, endless. Then all at once it stopped. Silence. The house stood still again. The only sound was her heavy breathing. She crawled toward the music box, hands shaking, and shut it closed. The moment she did, the room fell cold and quiet. She sat on the floor, gasping, staring at the open hole in the wall. And then she saw it. Carved into the wooden beam, written in faded black letters, were the words, "If you hear the whistle, it already knows your name." Evelyn packed her bags that night, but as she stepped toward the door, her phone buzzed, an unknown number flashing on the screen. She answered with a trembling voice. "Hello?" A pause, then a man's faint breath, and 3 soft notes, "Whoost, whoosh, whoosh." The line went dead. Evelyn didn't wait until morning. After hearing that whistle through the phone, she grabbed her coat and keys and ran. She didn't care where she went, she just needed to get out of that house. The night air hit her face like ice. Maple Street was silent except for the faint hum of power lines and the crunch of leaves under her shoes. Her car sat in the driveway. She climbed in, hands shaking as she turned the key. The headlights flicked on, illuminating the front of the old duplex. Through the second-floor window, she saw movement, like a shadow pacing slowly behind the curtains. Her chest tightened. "Nobody's there," she whispered to herself. "Nobody's there anymore." She threw the car into gear and sped away. By dawn, she was 50 miles from Millbrook Falls, sitting in a small roadside diner. The coffee was bitter, but it kept her awake. She hadn't slept in 2 days. The waitress smiled at her kindly. "Rough night?" she asked. Evelyn forced a laugh. "Something like that." She kept glancing at the door, half expecting someone, or something, to follow her. But the morning was calm. Maybe it was over. Maybe it had all been her imagination, twisted by exhaustion and old-town ghost stories. She reached into her bag to grab her phone, meaning to call her sister. When she turned it on, the lock screen froze. For a second, the display glitched. Lines of static and flickers of gray. Then faintly, the image changed. It wasn't her wallpaper anymore. It was a photo of her bedroom wall, Diraz, with a dark shape standing behind it, half seen through the peeling plaster. Her hand went cold. She dropped the phone. When she picked it up again, the image was gone. "Back to normal. Just leave me alone," she whispered. By noon, Evelyn checked into a cheap motel. The room was small, the wallpaper yellowed and peeling. But it was warm, safe. She locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and lay down. Exhaustion finally won. Within minutes, she fell asleep. She didn't know how long she'd slept when a sound pulled her awake, a soft, hollow tone echoing through the room. 3 notes. "Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh." She sat up, heart hammering. The sound was faint, maybe from the pipes, maybe from the wind. She pressed her ear against the wall. Nothing. Then she turned toward the bathroom door and slightly opened, and saw fog seeping out beneath it. Evelyn stood slowly. The bathroom light was flickering, casting dim flashes across the floor. She pushed the door open, whispering, "Hello?" The mirror was fogged over, the air thick with steam. But the shower wasn't running. She wiped her hand across the glass and froze. Written across the mirror in dripping letters were the words, "You left me." Her breath caught. The lights went out. In the reflection, she saw a tall shadow standing right behind her shoulder. She spun around, nothing. only the hiss of her own breathing. Then, faintly, through the vent near the ceiling came the whistle again, this time with a whisper layered beneath it. The house remembers. Evelyn ran from the bathroom, grabbed her keys, and bolted for the door. But when she yanked it open, the hallway outside wasn't the motel anymore. It was Maple Street. The same cracked walls, the same smell of dust and wood. Her old apartment stood before her, door open wide. She stumbled backward, shaking her head. "No, I left. I left you there!" The voice answered, calm and hollow. "You took her place. You don't get to leave." She blinked and the world snapped back. The motel, the hall, the flickering exit sign. Trembling, she slammed the door shut and fell to the floor, sobbing. The next morning, she drove back to Millbrook Falls. She didn't know why. Maybe she needed to end it, to face it. Maybe the only way to make it stop was to understand it. The Keller House looked abandoned now. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn. Even the ivy seemed dry and brittle. The front door was unlocked. She stepped inside. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Her footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. The walls groaned as if the house recognized her return. She whispered, "I'm not afraid of you." The whistle answered from upstairs, faint but clear. Whooshed, whooshed, whooshed. Evelyn followed it to her bedroom. The hole in the closet wall was gone. The panel was perfectly sealed, painted over as if it had never been touched. But she could still feel the cold air seeping out through invisible cracks. "Arthur," she said quietly, "I read about you. I know what happened. She died, you lost her. But you're not supposed to be here." A pause. Then the voice returned, softer than ever. "Neither are you." The wallpaper behind her began to ripple, bulging outward, forming the shape of hands pressing through. The floorboards shook. The room filled with that sweet, rotten smell again. Evelyn screamed and stumbled back as a low whistle rose, filling the room like wind through a grave. The shape on the wall moved closer, pressing harder until cracks split across the plaster like veins. "You opened the wall," the voice whispered. Now the house remembers. The ceiling light exploded, showering glass. The floor beneath her feet sank, bending like soft wood. For a moment, Evelyn thought she saw faces inside the walls. Pale, hollow-eyed faces whispering the same tune through stitched lips. "Worst, worst, worst." She fell to her knees, clutching her head. The air roared. Then silence. When she opened her eyes, everything was still. The house looked normal again. The hole was gone. The light was fixed. But she wasn't alone. From the corner of the room, a faint hum started, like someone quietly breathing behind the wall. Evelyn backed away, tears running down her face. She knew what it meant. The house wasn't haunted. The house was alive, and it remembered her. The sun had set behind the hills, drowning Millbrook Falls in a dull orange haze. Inside the old Keller house, Evelyn Harris stood in silence. The air was thick, unmoving, and cold. Every sound, the ticking clock, the creak of the floorboards, echoed too long, like the house was breathing with her. She had promised herself this was her last night here. One way or another, she was going to end this. She couldn't keep running. Not when that whistle followed her everywhere, even in her dreams. She set her phone to record again and placed it on the dresser. Then she faced the closet. The wall looked smooth, freshly painted, but she could still feel it, the cold pulse behind it, the hidden breath of something waiting. "Arthur," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I know you're still here." No response. Just a low hum like wind moving through a hollow pipe. "You've lost her," she whispered. "But I'm not, Margaret. You need to let her go." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the familiar tune began. Whisht, whisht, whisht. It came from all around her. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, as if the entire house was whistling at once. She covered her ears, but the sound grew louder, sharper, almost human. The walls started to shake. The lights flickered. "You took her place," the voice murmured. "You opened her door." The temperature dropped so fast that her breath came out in white clouds. Evelyn backed away. "You're not real," she said. "You're just a memory." The whistle stopped. Then came the voice again, close enough to make her skin crawl. "Then why are you afraid of me?" The floorboard split open behind her. A gust of freezing air blew up from beneath, smelling of rot and damp wood. She stumbled toward the doorway, but the door slammed shut with a thunderous crack. Plaster dust fell from the ceiling. "Please," she screamed. "I didn't do anything to you." "You heard me," the voice hissed. "You listened. That's all I needed." The wallpaper began to peel, curling back like old skin. Beneath it was dark wood, carved with strange symbols, names, and dates scratched deep into the grain. The oldest one read, Margaret, 1953. The newest one, Evelyn, 2025. Her heart dropped. Then she saw it. Faint handprints forming in the dust along the wall. As if someone inside was pushing to get out, the whistle started again, low and slow, until it became a scream. Evelyn ran for the window, slamming her shoulder into the glass. It didn't break. She hit it again and again until her arm ached. Finally, she turned and froze. The wall was opening. A long crack ran from floor to ceiling, the wood splitting apart. Behind it, she saw something pale, bone maybe, or the outline of a human face pressed in shadow. The voice spoke again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Stay, don't leave me alone again." Her tears fell as she backed toward the door. "I'm not her," she whispered. "You need to rest." The crack widened. A faint glow came from inside the wall, like light seeping from another world. She could see the shape more clearly now, the outline of a man, his lips moving in silence. Evelyn lifted her phone, trembling, and spoke directly into it. "If anyone finds this, don't come here. Don't listen to the whistle." The voice inside the wall changed, and it sounded younger now, desperate, broken. She said the same thing before she stopped breathing. The lights flickered violently. Then, with a loud snap, the entire closet wall gave way, bursting open in a cloud of dust and splinters. Evelyn screamed and fell backward, covering her face. When the air cleared, she looked up. There was a small room behind the wall, a hidden space only a few feet wide. Inside, slumped against the far corner, was a skeleton in a torn brown suit, its skull tilted to one side. Around its neck hung a rusted whistle on a chain. She stared, unable to breathe. Arthur Keller. The whistle on his chest moved, just slightly, and as if something unseen had breathed on it. Then it blew. The sound pierced the air, sharp and deafening. Evelyn clutched her ears and fell to her knees. The house groaned, the walls bending inward. Pictures fell, lights shattered, the floor cracked open. The whistle's sound rose higher, turning into a howl that filled her head with static and whispers. And then, silence. When she opened her eyes, the room was gone. Evelyn found herself standing outside the Keller house in daylight. The sky was bright, the birds were singing. The house looked new again, windows clean, porch repaired, ivy trimmed. She blinked in confusion. A woman in a blue dress stood on the porch, smiling gently. "Hi there," the woman said. "You must be the new tenant." "I'm Margaret Keller." Evelyn stepped back in horror. "No, that's not possible." Margaret tilted her head. "It's a lovely place, isn't it?" The walls. They listened. The door creaked open. From inside came a soft, familiar sound. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Margaret smiled wider. "He's been waiting for you." The world flickered, for just a second, and Evelyn saw herself standing inside the house. Behind the wall, eyes hollow, lips pursed, whistling the same tune. Then everything went dark. Weeks later, Mr. Keller returned to the property after the new tenant, a young woman, stopped answering calls. When he unlocked the door, he found the room silent and clean. But in the bedroom, written faintly under the new wallpaper, was a single message. "If you hear the whistle, don't answer." And somewhere deep within the walls of the Keller house, the tune began again. Shh. Ooh.